And especially when you're on Zoom, so you have like the 6 people staring you down. No, I came here. Yeah, I could have. So just to review what we dealt with yesterday, is we had a Mishnah that introduced a new halacha of a machlokes between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel if hekdesh betos is hekdesh. And the question is if you're going to learn it from Tmura, because Tmura betos is Tmura. Came along Rav Papa and told us that in fact our Mishnah is not even discussing hekdesh betos. It's actually discussing a legitimate nai, and what the fellow meant when he says shor shachar sheyetze mi beisi rishon, the black ox that leaves my house first, what he meant was just that. I'm not makbid bedavka on the first. I'm bedavka makbid on the first black ox that comes out. So if a white comes out first, no big deal. We'll wait till the first black ox comes out. That's the animal that I want to be makbid. And the Gemara said, so why is it called tos? That's a very clear hekdesh b'kavana. So the Gemara answers, it's not technically hekdesh b'tos, not a technical term of hekdesh b'tos, but it could be referred to as a mistake, because at first glance, when you look at his statement, it seems like he wants to focus on the absolute first animal that came out of the house or the barn, and we have to interpret his words as meaning the first black ox that comes out. So we're still at the position where Rav Papa is arguing that Beis Shammai holds hekdesh betos is not a good hekdesh. It doesn't work. Correct the Gemara. The Savri Beis Shammai hekdesh betos lo have a hekdesh. Does Beis Shammai actually hold that hekdesh betos is not hekdesh? I'm going to prove to you from a Mishnah that we're going to learn on Shabbos that in fact Beis Shammai holds hekdesh betos is hekdesh. Zok the Gemara, where do you see it? Tashma, hoyu mahalchin bederach, and the Girsa is really shisha shahoyu mahalchin bederach. There were 6 people as a group that were walking down the road. Now turning over onto Lamed Aleph Amud Beis, there were 6 people walking down the road. The echad ba kenegdon, and there's one gentleman that's approaching them. The Omar Echad, and one of these 6 people say, Hareni Nazir, I'm bekabel upon myself Naziris, Shezeh Ploni, that's Reuven. So if that's Reuven, I'm sure it's Reuven, I'm accepting upon myself Naziris. The Echad Omar, and the other guy said, nah, I don't think so. Hareni Nazir, She'ein Zeh Ploni. I'm being bekabel upon myself Naziris if it's not Reuven, because I believe it's not Reuven. So this reminds me of a friend of mine who 30 years ago, he started off as a stockbroker here in Toronto before the days of everything with online trading. So he wanted to get business from the wealthy people. So the way he did it was he would find a stock that he feel would be a very good opportunity to buy. He would approach a very wealthy person and say, give me a shot, put some money into this stock. You'll see that you'll make money and then maybe you'll start using it. So he went over to a very wealthy guy who's also eccentric. Please don't guess who it was because you are going to get it right on the first guess. And he told the fellow, I'd like your business and I want to start off by offering you this stock, which I feel is going to be very successful. So the guy says, you want business? I'll give you business. What are you recommending? I'm recommending buying 10,000 of these shares. Okay, short it. And of course, the stock soared and this guy lost his pants. But the next time he did listen to him. So that's what happened. This guy says, I want to be a Nazir if he's a Nazir. If he's Reuven. Really? I'll be a Nazir if he's not Reuven. Right? And then the third fellow said, the echad, and then the third guy said, Hareni Nazir, she'echad mekem Nazir. I'm being covered upon myself Nazirs if one of you 2 guys are a Nazir. Well, one of those 2 guys is for sure a Nazir, because it either is Reuben coming or it's not Reuben coming. So regardless, one of the first 2 is a Nazir. Or what if I said, I'm going to be a Nazir, she'ein echad mekem Nazir. If one of you is not a Nazir, which is basically the same thing. One of them is not a Nazir indeed. Or what if someone says, I'm going to be Kabal Nazir, Sheshnechem Nazir, if you're both Nazir? That's impossible, right? They can't both be Nazir. Only one can be right. Or Shakulcham Nazir, or both of you are Nazir. Beis Shammai Oimrim Kulam Nazirim. All 6 people are Nazir. Now that's clearly a hekdesh betos, because someone was Makabal Nazir if this guy was Reuben and the guy wasn't Reuben, and he's still considered a Nazir. Hekdesh betos. This is clearly a case of hektish betos. The katani kulam nazir. So you, Rav Papa, are trying to argue that Beis Shammai holds hektish betos is not hektish. This Mishnah that we're going to learn tomorrow is a checkmate. It's clear that hektish betos is hektish. Zok Gemara, you're right. Amri Savre Beis Shammai hektish betos have a hektish. In fact, you do have a raya that hektish betos, according to Beis Shammai, have a hektish from that Mishnah. Hachaloi. All Rav Papa was saying is our Mishnah. You don't have to learn that way. You don't have to learn that it was a toast and it's the white one that becomes a carbon. You could learn that the black one becomes a carbon, and it's not a case of hektish betos. It's a case of where he said, "I want the first black one." So halacha lemaisa, you're right. Beis Shammai does hold hektish betos is hektish, and therefore you might want to change the pshat in our Mishnah to the original pshat, and that's fine. The main point is it's not muchach from our Mishnah. It's only muchach from the Mishnah of the sixth Nazir. Let's see Tosfos.
What makes you say that Beis Shammai has to hold like that other Mishnah with the sixth Nazirim?
Because Beis Shammai said they're all Nazirim. Beis Shammai weighed in on it, and he said they're all Nazirim.
And didn't we learn earlier that there and what happens to Nazir is not exactly the same as when somebody makes something hektish? Like earlier on, they were I don't remember how far back it was, but that it's not a direct corollary.
The Gemara here is saying at least legabe hektish betos, you should have a raya from one to the next. I don't remember specifically what you're referring to with the Gemara making that distinction, but at least as far as the parsha of hektish betos, the Gemara sees fit to compare the two. Okay. So let's see what Tosfos says over here. Zok the Gemara Omri hacha savri Beis Shammai hektish betos have a hektish hasamoi. In fact, from the Mishnah with the Naziris, yeah, you have a perfect raya. Here you don't. Zok the Gemara. Well, first let's understand why is the case of Naziris a hektish betos. It's important to highlight that. So I'm going to go back to the earlier Tosfos on Daf Lamed Gilmor Amud Aleph, where the Tosfos himself says that he's referring to Lamed Aleph on the base. V'hacha the hektish betos who v'hava hektish. But Naziris to Tos. This is a Naziris of Tos. Why is this a Naziris of Tos? One of the first two fellows has to be wrong. It cannot be Reuben and also not be Reuben. So one of the two people are wrong. Yet Beis Shammai said, have a Nazir. Everyone is a Nazir. Each person, when they said, I want to be a Nazir, if this is Reuben or if it's not Reuben, the assumption was that I will become a Nazir and that I'm right. The Torah. And therefore, v'chayil alei Naziris afilu b'tos. Since I wanted to be Mekabel Naziris, and I just wanted to prove that or claim that I know who's coming, so that's a mistake. But even though it's a mistake there, my Naziris is still a good Kabbalah's Naziris. Hachanami. So too, in our case with the cows that came out first, is Leila Meimar, we should say, the Svir Lula Beis Shammai. The Beis Shammai holds the hektish betos gomer have a hektish. If you made a complete mistake when you're being makdish, it's still valid. What's our case? The Masnisa the Shar Shachar, our Mishnah was the case where he said the first ox that's black that comes out, I want it to be Kodesh. Pirish, V'halavan Kodesh. So we're going back to the original pshat that if the first animal that came out, even if it was a white ox, it will also be kadosh. The yesh lonu lefarish devara, because we can explain what he said. The mitchila neschaven lahektish loishna shachar v'loishna lavan. His intention was to make the first animal that comes out hektish, no matter what color it is. Sheyetzi mepesach rishon. But the kamar shachar. The reason why he said the black one, he made a mistake thinking that would come out first. Similar to the fellow with the Naziris, who said he wanted to be Mekabel Naziris anyway, but I thought that was Reuben. You could say that the white ox is Kadosh. That's a mistake. You don't see the whole Makor to the concept that Hektish Betos is good. It's not logic, it's a mistake. The logic is not like that. You need to have a place in the Torah to learn it from. What's the whole makar? Tamura. And didn't we say this is not similar to Tamura because by Tamura you're actually doing what the guy said, and here you're not doing what the guy said. So avagav the Tamura lo yahava adamati chatzi ayom v'lo koydem l'chay. Even though by Tamura you follow his words. If he says I want the Tamura to be chal later in the day, that's when it's chal. Hanamili b'Tamura de ka'amar beferish zu Tamura zu l'chatzi ayom. That's where there's no wiggle room whatsoever in how to interpret his words. There ain't lo nukoich listar devar. Where do you say that you follow exactly his words in the case of toes? That's if his words are so clear and there's no room whatsoever to interpret them differently. Here you can say that he didn't really mean to say, I don't want a white ox to be hektish. He just meant the first, and he mistakenly thought that the first would be white. So since there is some wiggle room to say he really didn't care about the color, he really cared about which came out first, there, even this type of hektish will be a toast. And similarly by Tamura, but if it's a case where it's crystal clear from his words what he said, well, yeah, there, even by Tamura, it would work, but of course it would work here as well. The hektish b'tois would be a hektish. Okay? Zok the Gemara, in fact, you have a good checkmate from the case of Nazir, that by Shammai all hektish b'tois have a hektish, but Hasam loy in our Mishnah, you don't have a right. From the Mishnah Nazir, you can prove about the 6 people. The Savr Bei Shammai, hektish b'tois have a hektish. We've proven it with the checkmate. And you can also say that the same thing applies in our Mishnah as well, right? Even though we could deflect and say our Mishnah is not a case of toes, and it's referring to the black ox becoming kadosh, you can also learn, like we just said, that the white ox becomes kadosh as hektish b'toes. And you can't ask me from Tamura where you follow his exact wording, because like Tosfos said a moment ago, where do you follow his exact wording by Tamura when his wording is so clear and specific that there's no room to interpret it in any other way? But here you could say that he wanted the first animal to be kadosh, and he thought it would be black, but in fact it was white. Hasam loy, hasam meaning the Mishnah that we learned on Daf Lamed Aleph Amud Aleph. There you don't have a raya independent of anything else that Beishamai al Taktis Betos have a hektish. Clever Mishnah Rishayna Shabbos Leichiach LeBeishamai that hektish Betos have a hektish Leka Lechuchamidi Kidulachi La'il, like Rav Papa told us earlier. So the maskana is we're on the same page. Beishamai al Taktis Betos is a good hektish. It's just not clearly proven from our Mishnah. You need the next Mishnah to clearly prove Beishamai's position. So that terminates the sugya and how to learn our Mishnah according to Rav Papa. In fact, you do say that the white ox becomes tamei, and the white ox becomes kadosh, becomes the carbon, becomes hektish, and the reason for it is because hektish betos is a good hektish. Abaya is going to have a whole new approach to this, a whole new approach to our Mishnah. So let's see what the Gemara says. Abaya says, Loi kasol kadaitach the kohen b'tzafra. I disagree with how you're learning that the case of our Mishnah was where he said in advance of the animals leaving, the animals are going to leave sometimes in the future. They're going to leave the barn sometime in the future. They're going to go out to pasture. And when they leave, the first one that leaves, that happens to be the black one, I'm going to make into a carbon. That's not the case at all. The case of the Mishnah is that he's already in the afternoon. He's referring to an event that had already occurred in the past. The Kohen B'Tihara, he was in the afternoon. The Amar, and he said, Shor Shachar Sheyotza, not Sheyetze in the future, but Sheyotza, which already left in the past. So he's in the afternoon, and he said, the black ox that left my house first, Lahav Hektish. Now he was wrong. It was the white that left first. He mistakenly thought it was the black. Well, Amr lay Labanofik, and they told him it wasn't the black ox that left first. In fact, the white ox left first. Well, Amr Lahain, and he said, Oy vey, I just wanted the first ox that leaves to become kadosh. Yehava Yodano, the Lavanofak, had I known that it was a white ox that left, Lo Yamri Shachar, I would have never said black. So there, he's clearly saying, I want it to be a nether. Because as Tosfos explains, I'm saying the animal came out already, and I'm sure that it was a black ox. It happened to not have been, but I'm sure it was, and I wanted to be Makabel Naziris, and I threw that in for good measure. But it's clear that I want to be a Nazir. That's a case of Nazir B'tos. There's Makabel Naziris, but there's some facts that are wrong. But if I'm talking about before the event happened, nobody in their right mind could convince themselves that they're going to know which ox is coming out first. If I'm in the afternoon and in my heart I believe that I know that the black ox came out first. How could you have known the black ox came out first? You obviously didn't see it because it was a misidentification. So Tosfos says, because this guy knew his animal so well, or he thought so at least, that he recognized the gait of the animal. Gait, G-A-I-T. Visa gait. Right? He was so sure that he recognized that it was the black ox that came out first. But he clearly wanted to be Makabel Naziris. And when he says based on the black ox coming out first, because he assumed that was the case. That's a good case where we know for sure he was Makabel Naziris, but it was Naziris B'tos. But if he's standing in the morning before the animals left, he wouldn't be able to convince himself that he's going to know what's going to occur in the future. So when he says early in the morning, which animal comes out first, the black one, that must be a Tanai. It can't be that he's for sure being Makabel Naziris. Because if he was for sure being Makabel Naziris, he should have just said the first one. By adding in black, that means he's making a Tanai. Because he can't possibly know what's going to come out first. And therefore, I'll agree with you that if he said in the morning, the one that's going to come out first, black, then I'll agree to Basil that if the animal came out and it was white, there is no hektish at all. Hektish B'tos that we're talking about is where we know for sure I wanted it to be hektish because it was after the fact, but I still made a mistake in how I expressed it. Let's see Tosfos who elaborates on this very, very nicely. And Tosfos once again is on Daf Lamed Gimel Amud Beis. Or actually, it starts on Lamed Gimel Amud Aleph at the bottom. So we'll learn this Tosfos because it really clarifies beautifully what it is. Abaye Omer, the second to the last line on Lamed Gimel Amud Aleph. Lo yisol kadaitach the koibit safer. It doesn't make sense to learn that the case of our Mishnah is when he was in the morning before this happened. Who let the dogs out? The horse is already out of the pen. Lirois b'mira to go and pasture in the meadow. The first animal that left the gate this morning, it doesn't make a difference from the whites, from the blacks. Lahava hektish, that animal should become hektish. I'm on the first column of Tosfos on Daf Lamed Gimel Amud Aleph. Well, Amruloi, and they told him, I'm sorry, I'm Lamed Gimel base, thank you. Well, Amruloi, they told him it was the Lavan that was Yotzat Tchila. You're mistaken. You made a toast. The Amar, and he said, "You have a Yadana the Lavan Nafak, we have Amr Shachar Lavan." So clearly, he wants the Naziris regardless. He just mistakenly thought that he was so sure that it was the black ox that came up first. Zaktois the hashta yeshlan lemeimar so yadaitoi lechol mishiyetzerishay. It's clear that he wanted to be makdish the very first animal that came out. He made it very clear. Had I known it was the white, I would have said the white. So clearly, he wants the first animal to be kadosh. Therefore, even the lavan will be hektish. You know why? And this is very doimah to Tmura, because we're going to say that I didn't mean, sure I said shachar, so it's not exactly like Tmura, because Tmura we're actually enforcing his exact words. Here there's a toast that he said shachar even though he meant it anyway. But Abaye's position is the ikoy b'tzafra v'amar shor shachar sheyetzer rishon. And then it turned out for Amar Lava Nafak was really the white one that came out. The Amar, and then he said, the Lava Nafak. If I would have known that the white one was going to come out, Havamina, I would have said the Lavan. The Baha, Afilu Beishamai Moidi, the Hektish. The case where Rav Papa just agreed that in fact the Lavan will be hektish, even though it's a massive mistake, Zoktabai, that's pushing it too far. There I would agree that it's not hektish. He couldn't possibly have known what's going to happen in the future. And since he couldn't have known what's going to happen in the future, why would he have mentioned black? He has no idea if it's going to be black. If his real intent was to be makdish, the very first animal, and he has no idea what's going to come out first, why would he say shachar for? Therefore, he must have wanted dafka if the first animal was black. Even if he thought that would happen, he couldn't possibly have known. And therefore, there it's too far from what he wanted to suggest that you should learn from Tamura. And therefore, although we said a moment ago, according to Rav Papa, that's called a hektish patos, and the Lavan would become kadosh, Abai said, I disagree. This is too far. It wouldn't become kadosh. In the case of the Shisha Shayom Malcham Derech, we say they're all Nazirim. You can't compare that case to the other case where Beis Shammai says that they're all Nazirim. The Hazam have a Nazir, Afilu Oizoi Shalai Nimse Kedvara. There we say even the person who was wrong, he's a Nazir. His Tanai wasn't fulfilled. The reason why is because we know that when he was Makabal Naziris, he wasn't really linking it to the outcome of who that person was. When someone said, if that's Reuben, I want to be a Nazir, he means I want to be a Nazir regardless. He's so sure that's Reuben, so he sticks that in. But he clearly wants to be a Nazir. He made a mistake. He thought it was Reuben, it really wasn't. Similarly, he thought this ox sounded like a black, and it was really a white. But he surely wants the Naziris. Therefore, he's a Nazir. Aval Hacha. But in the case where in the morning, before you have any idea which animal is going to come out first, on what premise will he base his prediction that it's a black that's going to come out? Since no one in their right mind could do that, what he must have meant was that I wanted Dafka to be a black ox. And therefore, nothing becomes Kadosh. But if it's after the fact, where it's already his knowledge as to which animal came out, Yotzu, the animals have already left the shed, then Yeshlon Lameimar, there when he said, I want to be a Nazir, there when he said, I want the animal the black animal that came out first to be Kadosh, it means he wants the first animal to be Kadosh. The only reason why he mentioned black is he heard the gait of the animal leaving. He thought that he could recognize just from their gait which animals they are. So that's mamish doing to the case of Naziris, where we're talking after the fact. He also made a mistake thinking that this was Ruvain, Loimer, Ishplenihu, and that's why he said that. But he wants to be a Nazir. He's not. When do you say it's a Tanai? That's if it's a Tanai on something that I don't know, something in the future. But something in the past, which I convince myself, I think I know, there you're not making a Tanai. There you want to be a Nazir, but there's a mistake in your words. Here he wanted to be Makish to first animal. He just mistakenly thought that it was a black one. There you could learn from Tamura, because it's not so far apart. Basil would argue and hold that even that wouldn't be hektish because it's a tos, and tos is hektish for tos is not hektish. Beautiful.
So now according to this explanation, what happens to the guy who said that if both you two are both Naziris, there was no possibility that after the fact that could be true. There was no Havamina that could happen.
Exactly. So we're gonna analyze that soon in Beis Shammai, but that's exactly Beis Shammai's point, that when I said already Nazir, since I know the deal, I know it's impossible that they're both Nazirim. But someone who says already Nazir, it means he wants to be Makabel Naziris no matter what, and anything else that he says afterwards doesn't matter, even though it's clearly a mistake and it's wrong. And that's exactly the point that Hektish B'tois have a Hektish. He's saying something that he knows is wrong, but he's definitely not linking his Kabbalist Naziris to the facts. Whether he knows he's wrong or doesn't know he's wrong, it's still considered wrong, toast, mistaken. And therefore, we ignore that and we still make him into a Nazir. That is exactly Bisham's position. And that's a more radical, because there, like you're saying, even when he said it, he knew that it couldn't possibly be true.
So this whole place is explaining Beis Hill then?
No, it's explaining Beis Shammai.
But why do you have to go and explain Beis Shammai so intricately when it doesn't matter? Beis Shammai says even if he knew he was wrong, it's okay, he becomes a Nazir. What do you start making all these rationalizations if the rationalizations don't matter?
Because it would matter, because if it was a case where he didn't know the outcome first, for instance, if he said there's nobody walking down the street, but the next guy who comes down the street, if he's Ruvain, then I want to be a Nazir. There, Toshus is saying you wouldn't be a Nazir. The only time we say that Hektish Tosh have a Hektish or your Kabbalah Naziris B'tosh is only if you don't care if you're right or wrong. It's clear that you want to be Makabel Naziris regardless. The Toshus have to go through the Torah to make a distinction between if you said these same words at a point where you can't convince yourself that you know the facts. Whenever you're saying these words at a period in time where you cannot convince yourself that you know the facts, well, then we say you're actually making a legitimate Tanai. But when it's obvious that your words are wrong, or when you think your words are right, then we use the concept of Hektish B'tois, have a Hektish, and even though what you're saying makes no sense, we still consider it the Kabbalah's Naziris.
So there's basically two different scenarios of Kabbalah's B'tois that you become a Nazir. Basically, is what it's breaking it out.
Correct. One is when I know for sure I'm wrong, and one is when I think I'm right, but I'm wrong anyway.
I think I'm right. And I don't know if this is relevant, but we know that animals are creatures of habit. So the big cow is always the first one out of the barn to get the mezainis. So how come they don't speak about that?
It's funny that you say that, because we're soon going to learn that white cows, at least according to Reb Chisda, white cows, when it comes to plowing, doing work, they're dominant, they're aggressive. So I guess, and black cows have better hide, and red cows have better meat. So physically, I would say the most aggressive cow would be the white cow. So you're saying, why isn't that legitimate? It is legitimate, but it's still, the likelihood might be that it's the white one that would come out first, but you still can't be 100% sure enough to say that it wasn't a Tanai. Anything in the future, even though the odds are for it, but it's still not guaranteed. Something that happened already, that's for sure not a Tanai, because it happened already. Okay, so let's see the Gemara Vayter. So now what Abaye is doing is he's totally revolutionizing the Mishnah. We learned that he said, Sheyetze mitchila, the animal that leaves first, and now he's saying it's Sheyotza mitchila, it's talking in past tense, the animal that left. Frek the Gemara, v'hakatani, mumi matas amrit, the kohen betira asik. How can you say that we're talking about after the fact? There's the second and third case of the Mishnah, which are clearly in the future. V'hakatani dinishozov sheyale, that I will in the future take out of my pocket. So you see clearly we're talking about the future. Zok Gemara, for one little yud, you can amend the Mishnah, and you could say that a tos fell into the copy. Tani sha'ala, Frek Gemara, fine. But the third case of the Mishnah, it is chaval shal yain shetale, that I will in the future take out. Zok Gemara, Tani sha'alsa. You could scramble the words and say he put the letters out of order, and it really meant in the past. Okay. Now, this is where,
like the judge you faced.
like the what?
like the
The
judge
judge,
you face.
that's right. Exactly.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
this is where I got up to this
Wow.
morning because I came terribly, terribly late. So if you want, we can move towards the Mishnah and then we'll stop at the Mishnah. Or if you want, I'm going to start here tomorrow, both tomorrow afternoon and tomorrow night. I'm going to stop here, but we have a little bit of time and it's an easy Gemara. So let's push towards the Mishnah. Amar B'chisar. B'chisar said a general rule, nothing to do with our sugya. He's teaching us in Hilchos Mekach Memkar which cows are good, which oxen are good, which oxen are lesser quality. He said, Uchma b'chivra. What if you have a whole group of white animals and you find one black animal in the group, lucky? That's going to reduce the value of the entire herd. So if you want to sell a herd of animals, if they're all white, you're going to be much better. If there's one black mixed into it, that's already going to devalue the whole herd. A. And halacha B is chivra b'uchma. If you have a black animal that has a white patch on it, lucky, that's a sign that there's a problem with this animal. It's a scab. It's some type of nega that it had, and the scab is that white patch. So let's have a look at what Tosfos says about this halacha. If you have a herd of white oxen and there's a black one amongst them, lucky means migareya oisom. It actually devalues the rest of the herd. Since there's a black one mixed into the herd, that undermines their value because white animals are much better than black. Now, why should it make a difference? So then don't buy the black one. Why do they make the white ones worth less? I don't know. I'm only guessing is that maybe it's from the same herd. So then it's a sign that there's some black genes in these white cows. And that's why it devalues it. Because just because I took a black cow and mixed it with a white cow, it should make the white cows worth less. So that's what I'm thinking. I don't know if the R scroll says anything, but
the R scroll, yes, I looked in the R scroll. It says it's just like the neighborhood. When you have a Schwarzer move into one house, all the rest of them go down in value. That's what the R scroll.
Okay. Kesem lovan. If you have a white scab, the shor shachar on a black ox, lakusa. It's not a patch of skin. It's actually a sign of a wound that's healing. Clearly, there was some type of skin affliction on the animal. Tam chivra bebisra botku. There was some white patch in the meat. Botku beduchte v'ashkach. When they were biting, they found that there was an issue. And the types of these words are matzu kesem lavan. They found like a white stain, scab, and discoloration on the skin. The yadu kitzaras haybamokum kesem. It means that for sure there was tzaras. It's a sign of tzaras.
So it's not a sign that it's a mixed breed. Like, so interesting. Why are they saying that just because you have black? Or maybe it's not
like a neighborhood. That's why I'm thinking we must be concerned that somehow there's genes in this pool. Okay. Zokta Gemara weiter. Now we're challenging base Reb Chisda as saying that white oxen are of a higher quality. Zokta Gemara, Tanan we learned our very Mishnah. Shachar sheyotza mi beis rishain hektish. We say that the white one will be hektish. Kasalka daita. As a baseline, we accept as a general rule, ki maktish b'ayin ra maktish. When you're maktish something, the assumption is that you want to give less and not more. So if I want to be maktish an animal, then I want to be maktish the least valuable animal. So if I said a black animal and a white animal is worth more, I for sure don't want to give a white animal because I want to give the bare minimum. From the fact that we're saying halacha l'maisa, that the white animal becomes kadosh, that must be that the white animal is less valuable than the black animal, because otherwise nobody would have said that he actually meant to be makdish the white animal. Well, Amr b'Shama have hektish, so it must prove that a white animal is less valuable. So how could you, Reb Chisda, say that a white animal is more valuable? So what do you want to say? Bein yafa makdish, if you want to explain it according to Reb Chisda, that the white animal becomes kadosh is because maybe our assumption is wrong. Maybe when someone wants hektish, she wants the best. So if he said black ox, that means as a minimum black ox. But if it's a white ox, I for sure want that. I want to upgrade my hektish commitment. Well, how would you explain this mahalach in the next case of the Mishnah? Dinner shel zov sheyala b'yad rishon v'ala shel kesef. Nobody can argue under any circumstances that silver is more valuable than gold. Yet Veishama Yomim hektish. How is it hektish if a person wants to upgrade or not downgrade? It must be from the second case of the Mishnah. You see clearly that a person wants to give the bare minimum. And therefore, even though he said gold, but if silver shows up, he's very happy that it should be silver because he wants to give the bare minimum. The Elamai Bein Ramaktish. So we do have proof from the Mishnah, from at least the case of Dinner Zov, that somebody wants to give the bare minimum. So based on that, let's look at the third case. Oil is known to be more valuable than wine. If you're telling me from the middle case that you always want to give the bare minimum, how could you say that the shemen will be hektish if I said wine? You told me that the assumption is that you always want to give the bare minimum, and here we're saying the shemen becomes kodesh. Shemen clearly is more valuable than wine. Surely he didn't mean it. That's not shver, because the third case of the Mishnah might be speaking in a case where the oil is less valuable than the wine. Normally oil is more valuable than wine. Begalila shanu. It's in Galil where they have so much oil that it's not worth as much. And if anything, wine is more valuable in the Galil. The Chamra Odaf mi Mishra. So the third case of the Mishnah is consistent with the second case, that a person is always going to want to downgrade, and therefore if he said wine, oil will also be kadosh because it's a downgrade. If he said gold, he means silver as well because he's downgrading. But at the end of the day, that's not going to be consistent with the first case. The first case seems to indicate quite clearly that a white ox is inferior to a black ox. Reisha kashalar b'chista. Amalek b'chista, no problem. Ki amri b'tur the Carmenoi. In the kingdom of Carmenoi, there the white oxes are superior to all other animals. But everywhere else in the world, there's no such thing. Maybe black oxes are better. They're on equal ground. And now we're discussing a whole new conversation that's basically coming to the same conclusion, but from a different place. Reb Chisda said elsewhere, a black ox is very good for its hide. Black oxen have very good hide. Sumka, a red ox, lebisrei, has very good meat. Chiyura, a white ox, liridai, it's very good for plowing to do work. That's what I mentioned earlier to Dov there. They're the most active oxen. Right, the Gemara didn't hear Reb Chisda said they all have their advantages. Didn't you say a minute ago that white is the best? Dr. Gemara, where did Reb Chisda say that white is the best? That's only in Carmenoi. But in any other place, all of the oxen have their own features that are dominant. So the white ox works the best, the black ox has the best hide, and the red ox has the best meat. Okay, we'll stop here, and B'ezras Hashem, we will be mamshech. I wanted to mention that today is the yahrzeit of the Lavush. His name was Mordechai Yafi, and he was a fascinating man. He was zoicha to write 10 svarim, all named after a different Lavush that's relevant to the Megillah. It says Mordechai Yotza, Bilvush, Malchus Tchelas. I'm going to list up all of them. And his name was Mordechai Yafi. So therefore, every one of his svarim, he named after one of the Levushim, one of the different Malbushim listed in the Megillah as Mordechai's Levushim. Why was he zoicha to write those 10 svarim? Because he was an extremely unusually good-looking man. And he used to be a door-to-door salesman. I'm not sure if it was vacuum cleaners that he sold or if it was encyclopedias. But he once showed up into the household of a very powerful, noble woman who also was very hareini, muchad, and mazuman at the time. You know what that means? She was very hareini, muchad, and mazuman at the time. And she made a pass at him. And he had a terrible situation like Yosef and Eishes Paitivar. And he had to escape that he shouldn't cast a shalom minichshel. So the only way out was he jumped into a sewer system. And he ran through the sewers to get away from her. And he was wearing 10 beautiful articles of clothing that all got terribly soiled and ruined because of his journey through the sewer system. And that then and there he was zoicha to get the most beautiful 10 malbushim, the malbushim of Mordechai, and that's why his svarim are all called Labush Mordechai. But the epilogue to the story was in the late 1800s. There was a boy who was in the yeshiva, and he was off the charts, an incredibly good-looking guy. He looked like, let's say, like David Light. He was an off the charts, good-looking guy, and one day his father came to visit him in yeshiva. One day his father came to visit him in yeshiva, and his father was so ugly you couldn't look at him. So when the Rosh Yeshiva greeted the father, he said, "This is your son," as if like, "Are you sure he's not adopted?" Like, and he said that the father said, "I want you to know, I'm the 10th generation from the Labush. My name is Yafi. His name was Yafi because Yafi means beautiful. I'm the 10th generation from the Labush." And after that horrible story that the Labush had, that Baruch Hashem he was saved, he davened to the Rebbeinu Shalom that for 10 generations his children shouldn't be beautiful, because he didn't want them to have such nisyonis. So I got a chazonish shear of not being beautiful. But my son is the 11th generation. So he went back to our natural genetics. And that's why he's so good looking, and I'm not so much so good looking. Gewaltig. I always tell my wife,
the son become a salesman.
That I'm overweight. You know, no one started up with me. Even if I want, they don't want. So you don't need to worry about that. So I'm safe. I'm safe. Like Mitzvah says, not nisyonis, dimyonis.
Dimyonis.
Like Mitzvah always says over a story about a Yerushalmi that was on Rehov Yafo. And he saw there a beautiful, beautiful Israeli woman that was poets from Ruba La'omen, right? Less clothing than normally. And he had a big taiva. So he said, Yetzirah, you've convinced me. Now you just have to try to convince her. Gewaltig. Okay. Have a wonderful, wonderful day and a good chance.